Hello and welcome back to DEETALKS. I'm Deepthi, author of the book The Gloriously Lost. This is the second episode where we all are gathering to learn and share our knowledge about how to create greater stories. As the title suggests, we are going to discuss about the three-act story structure. In the previous video, we have learned about how to pick that one fascinating storyline. This would be the one that we need to do right after picking the storyline in order to create the bigger picture. And this is divided as Act 1 being the beginning or the conflict, Act 2 being the middle or the struggle, and Act 3 being the end or the resolution. If you deeply notice, all the stories, literally all the stories are based on this three-act story structure. If you ask me that if this is a necessary step to follow, then I wouldn't say yes. But if you decide to put your story into this three-act story structure, I assure you that this definitely works. The placement of the incidents might vary depending on the pace of the storytelling. In movies, this can be called as screenplay, but the structure basically stays intact. I'll tell you what happens in these acts for an ideal story. On Act 1, which is the beginning, the protagonist's current situation or the environment is fairly explained. In turn, if there are any more characters that are essential to be known at this point in time, they are also introduced. Importantly, the conflict, the problem statement, whatever the protagonist is going to deal with in this entire story is introduced. So this is where you can establish the core characteristics or strong details of the characters, whichever you want the audience to know certainly about. For example, if you want the audience to know that your protagonist is naive and indecisive, you shouldn't tell them that the protagonist is naive and indecisive. Instead, you should pop in a situation where the protagonist reacts naive or indecisive, so that in turn the audience will learn the same. So all these character introductions and initial situations should lead the protagonist to that one problem statement or the conflict, which is also known as inciting incident in the writing world. We can learn about inciting incident more in detail in the upcoming videos. So that inciting incident happens in the Act 1, where the protagonist's life goes upside down or the beliefs go upside down. And here comes the Act 2, which is called the middle or the struggle or confrontation. And this is where you write how the hook or the inciting incident is affecting the protagonist. How is the protagonist reacting or struggling or changing because of that problem? During the Act 2 is when, in addition to the conflict that you've introduced in the Act 1, you can add more meaningful conflicts to make the protagonist struggle more. I know this might sound like a psychopath, but all the writers should be psychopaths at some point. This is the place where you can add in subplots or introduce additional characters, eventually for the same target, make your protagonist struggle more. This is a bit critical area to write because you need to show the struggles of your protagonist, but do not let the audience get bored and make sure the arc doesn't go flat. You can achieve this by adding more subplots in between, but we can look at subplots in detail in the upcoming videos. So end of Act 2 is where the protagonist would hit that rock bottom, where the character believes that that is it and they cannot move any further. And that is when the Act 3 starts. Act 3, otherwise known as the end or the resolution. Yes, this is the place where the audience would be expecting something nice to happen to the protagonist who is already dying. Not literally, but metaphorically. Act 3 is basically the end of your story or the resolution of the conflict that you've created in the Act 1. Ideally, most of the writers would create or start their stories knowing what the climax or the ending would be. Although it's not necessary, you can just have the characters or the challenges in your mind and then start writing. But eventually, it is good to have the end before you reach it, because otherwise you tend to mislead the story and reach a destination which you will be really not happy about. If you know the Act 3 or the ending of a story, then it's easier for you to write the Act 2, which is the middle, wherein you can put all the characters or situations towards whatever you think the Act 3 is going to be. And importantly, Act 3 is where you close all the threads that you have created from Act 1 and Act 2. Leaving a thread unclosed is a poor writing, and we don't want to do that. If we want to take a very basic example of the rabbit and the tortoise story for the 3-act structure, Act 1 is where the rabbit and the tortoise are introduced, and they both eventually take place in a race. That could be the introduction of the conflict because of the very obvious reasons. However, in the middle, we see that the rabbit takes breaks just because it's fast enough, and the tortoise keeps working to reach the destination. Just for instance, if you need to add any subplots in here in the Act 2, we can create any hurdles for the tortoise, who is already slow but consistent. And as we all know that the rabbit dozed off, in the Act 3, tortoise would win the race. Just understand that this 3-act structure can only help us if we would like to structure a story according to it. Thanks for watching DEETALKS. We're going to look at more topics regarding writing, and if you're interested, follow along. And until then, bye.